What's going on, X-Men fans? It's me, the X-Men guy, and today we are going to be having the 2023 Second Annual Comic Awards. The show where I give awards to comics and creators that I think really stood out this year. So without further ado, let's get into it. Our first category for the night is events. Now, what was the best event of the year, and what events did we have this year? So this year was chock full of a bunch of events. There was Dark Web, that one Captain America event, Fall of X. I didn't really count Fall of X because it wasn't really like a centered event, but that's more of a line. But anyway, I'm yapping. The event that I thought stood out beyond most of them is Sins of Sinister. Now, this is an event that is basically Mr. Sinister, the X-Men's villain, basically is able to control the world and implant a little bit of him into some of the world's strongest mutants, heroes, and just people in general. He quickly takes over the world and tries to control something called the Dominion, which will basically enable him to become more powerful than anyone and exist outside of space and time. Now, I really like this event because it's a very creative concept and mirrors Age of Apocalypse a little bit, while not like directly copying off of it. Now, this event also has great implications for the future, which we saw at the end of this year. And I'd even say that this was built up to impeccably by Kieran Gillen, who we gave out a lot of awards to last year. His Immortal X-Men run led up to this event, and his writing carried it. The main line of this event, like in between Sins of Sinister 1 and the last comic in the event, Sins of Sinister Dominion, was a little worse than the first and last book, but I do have to say it was a very good event. So, we're going to give Kieran Gillen his first Golden Doctor Strange of the night. So, yeah, let's go on to the next category. Next up, we have Best Series of the Year. Now, there are a lot of good series of the year. However, a lot of them were inconsistent this year. One of which is X-Men Red. It had high highs but low lows this year, and I was really disappointed this year because I loved every single comic that came out in the X-Men Red series last year, so I was a little disappointed in it this year. But for second place in the best series of the year, I'm gonna have to give it to Kieran Gillen with Immortal X-Men. Now, however, how I don't think it is as good as it was last year, I do think it really led up to its ending when it inevitably ended at the end of the year. So, yeah, that's who I'm going to give second place to. But first place, I'm going to have to give it to the main X-Men line by Gerry Duggan. Now, Gerry Duggan, I didn't like his run of X-Men at the beginning, but I grew to really like it, and especially over this year after the Hellfire Gala and the Fall of X started, I really started to love his series. I think you'll see later when I say my top 15 comics of the years, there will be a lot of stuff by him in it. I think he did great work this year, and yeah, let's get on to the next category. Next up is Creators of the Year. Now, for second place, I'm gonna have to give it to, again, Kieran Gillen. Kieran Gillen spearheaded a very good event and a very good Immortal X-Men series this year, but it wasn't enough to get him into first place. However, I do want to recognize him as doing a lot of really good things this year throughout his series on Immortal X-Men and his Sins of Sinister event. So this is for Kieran Gillen. Now, the best creator this year, I think, was probably Jonathan Hickman. Now, Jonathan Hickman, not only is he an elite writer that most people would know if you have any knowledge of Marvel comics or any comics in general, but this year he had 2 major projects, and I think he executed wonderfully on each of them. His first project, Ultimate Invasion, is actually leading to the rebirth of the Ultimate Universe in 2024, which I don't want to make any false promises like I did last year with covering Sins of Sinister, but I might be covering. And also, That Movie Nitpicker made a great video about it. That should have a link in the description. If not, go to his channel and check it out because it's really good. And also, he had Gods, which I've read the first issue of, and let me tell you, I'm going to get the rest of them because it is a very interesting concept, and I don't want to spoil any of it because it's just really good. It centers around 2 new characters, Win, and I forget his sidekick's name, I'll have it up here. Yeah, it was just really great. They go around basically trying to keep the, they were trying to keep, I don't really know how to explain it. The world going around, I guess. They work close with Doctor Strange, so if you like Doctor Strange, you'll like the first issue. But yeah, I think both of those books were really good this year, and that's why I have to give it to Jonathan Hickman. Also, he's just a great writer in general. But on to our next category. Before we get into the top 15 comics of the year, I do want to give a small spoiler warning because I will be discussing what happens in each of those comics. Alright, so coming in at number 15 for the best comics of the year that I've read, in my opinion, I'm giving it to X-Men 28, and this is a variant cover, but in this issue, we see, what really stood out in this was the first few pages with Sunfire, who was previously on the X-Men, earlier in this series. We get to catch up on what he's been doing since he left the team. And he's been trying to find Redroot, who, if you don't know, is very important to the island of Arakko. And you don't need to worry what the island of Arakko is until later, but it's important, right? And then he is saved, he's about to die, and he is saved by Apocalypse. And this is important in the X-Men Red series, which I'm not sure if the exact issue where that is important is on the list, but yeah. So anyway, the rest of this issue basically is about, it's basically about Firestar, I believe that's her name, right? Firestar? Yeah, Firestar trying to break Juggernaut out of prison and out of Orchis' hands. And the only reason this is this low is because I feel like it's just really easy for Firestar to fool Orchis. Orchis is supposed to be some of the greatest minds in all of the Marvel Universe, and it just feels like they're easily tricked. So that's the only reason it's this low on the list. But anyway, the next comic on the list, coming in at number 14, is Immortal X-Men 11. Now, in this comic, it basically deals with the fallout of Sins of Sinister, and I think it's really cool how you can't really trust who is still infected with Mr. Sinister and who is not. And spoilers, but it ends up the only person who is still infected is Professor Xavier, but we don't find that out until much later. Also, in this comic, we also get a hint to the next issue where Colossus is being not taken over by Sinister, but taken over by his brother. But anyway, for number 13 on the list, we have another issue 11 and Storm cover. This is X-Men Red issue 11. Now, in this issue, what I liked most about it is basically Storm's character development and relationship with Professor X. In this issue, she vents out her frustrations with Xavier, and what's really cool, what I thought was a really cool page, is this page. It goes through all their history together, and I thought it really, got the message across in a cool, artistic way. It also partially deals with the fallout of Sins of Sinister, and I think it's a really cool issue. Next up, we have, for number 12, I believe, is Sins of Sinister issue 1. Now, I already said why I like this issue, so we're not going to spend too much time on it, but this entails basically Mr. Sinister being drugged down to the pit, but he's not gone. His infection has already run rampant, and now he's taking over the world. The world is basically going into a crazy state, and it sets up the entire event, which I think is a pretty cool event. Next, number 11, we have X-Men 27. Now, in X-Men 27, we see a lot of cool Kitty Pryde stuff. This is her first time trying to get, this is her time, sorry, she's not the same character as Firestar. She tries to break out Juggernaut and Cyclops, but to no avail. And what I think is really cool is it's just a fun story where the X-Men go and see the Fantastic Four, and there's a little brawl because of Rasputin 4, and there's a little brawl, but they all eventually get to work together, and I think it's pretty cool. Now, next up, at number, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, number 10, we're in the top 10 now, is X-Men Red 10. Now, X-Men Red 10 was basically the finale of the arc leading up to it. It was 10 stories in this arc, and I thought it was really good and well executed. And all culminating in the ending of showing that Orbis Stellaris was one of the Sinisters. So I thought that was a really good issue. Number 9, Ultimate Invasion, written by Jonathan Hickman. Now, I already said in my, where I said that Jonathan Hickman was the best writer of the year, or creator of the year, some things that happened in this book, but basically what the specifics are: a group of people are hired to break the inventor out of his prison, and he basically creates his own body out of them, and as a decoy. And he goes, and through this series, he recreates the Ultimate Universe, and this is just the start. And he goes back and actually changes that Spider-Man does not get bit by the radioactive spider. You see, he smacks it away and doesn't let him get bit, and that leads him to Ultimate Spider-Man. Now, at number 8, we have another Jonathan Hickman book, Gods. Now, I thought Gods was really good. I already said a little bit of what it was about, and I just thought it was really cool. And there were little parts that were a little bit of a drag, which is why it's not up higher. And I thought it was a little long and very expensive. It's $10 for just a comic, so that's like double the price of a usual comic, so it is very expensive. Next up, I believe it's number 7 now, right? Let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 15. Yeah, 7. Okay, Jean Grey. Now, this is a really cool series, and this is just the best one of the series. I would read all of them if I were you. But it's basically a while ago, like mid-2010s, there were some time travel shenanigans, and the original 5 X-Men got brought to the present. Now, this is basically Jean Grey, after she dies, basically trying to find out what would be the best outcome of the universe if I did something different. And she's basically going back, changing things in time, seeing what she can do differently. And in this issue, she sees what would happen if I didn't erase my memory when I went back to my original timeline. And she explores that, and I think it's just really well written by Louise Simonson, the original X Factor writer. Well, she's not the first one, but she's the best one. And yeah, I think it's really cool. Next up, we have Immortal X-Men 17, the second to last issue of the series. And it is really, really good. We find out that Charles Xavier still has a little bit of Sinister left in him from Sins of Sinister. And Mother Righteous basically shows her true colors to the X-Men, that she too is a Sinister. And yeah, I think it's a really cool issue, but not without its flaws. Next, we have number 5. We are in the top 5 here. X-Men 25. Now, this is following right after the Hellfire Gala, and this is basically just a whole pretty huge comic, just filled with Kitty Pryde being a badass and just beating up Orchis people, and basically showing the fallout of what happened in the Hellfire Gala. So, moving on to number 4, we have Magneto. Now, Magneto is a comic set in the past, where when Magneto was the headmaster of the school. And I really like the character development that goes on with him and his relationship with Wolfsbane. And he also sees a ghost of, I believe, a kid that he saw when he was in a concentration camp. Also, I think there's some really cool artwork that goes back to those old days of the X-Men, and he keeps seeing this ghost of a kid he saw back in his day. And then he comes back. It's the holiday season, and all of the New Mutants are knocked out. And he sees that there is a forgotten X-Men. And it's very fun to find out who it is. Now, number 3. We are in the top 3. Immortal X-Men 18. Now, Immortal X-Men 18 is the end of the series, and you should read the entire Immortal X-Men series. It's very good. So good. And it's basically Mr. Sinister and Charles Xavier working together. And eventually, at the end, what's the best part of it? I'm not going to spoil all of it, but the best part is that we find out there's a 5th Sinister. And it's just a great reveal. It really has your jaw dropped. Can't wait until we find out more in Kieran Gillen's next X-Men series. Now, second place, the Silver Charmander, goes to Kieran Gillen with Immortal X-Men 10. Immortal X-Men 10 was the payoff right before Sins of Sinister, and it was just so good. The world came crashing down on Mr. Sinister, and it was an action-packed, great payoff to the 10 issues of this series before this. And at the end, we find out that Charles Xavier has infected with Sinister. Now, the moment you've all been waiting for. The number one comic of this year that I've read, in my opinion, is Hellfire Gala #1, 2023. I thought it was just so good. Now, it starts off a little bit slow. And I feel like that's intentional, to show that it's just a normal, boring night. But then, quickly, after pages, when I was reading this, I was like, oh, this is confused. So if you don't know what the Hellfire Gala is, it's basically a party that the X-Men throw so that they can elect new X-Men. They do it every year for the last 3 years. This is the 3rd year they're doing it. And I thought, like, it's this big, and they started, usually they don't elect them until the end. They started electing them at the beginning. So I was like, what's the rest of this thing going to be? What's the rest of this book going to be about? So I was a little confused when I was reading it. And then I saw, oh, they got elected. That's cool. And then I turned the page, and it was the most jaw-dropping moment that Nimrod, so Nimrod is a Sentinel, just full-on just smashed everybody, every single person there. It was just insane. Then, after that, each page of the turn was another surprise. Iceman being killed by Nimrod. After that, Tony Stark's Sentinels being flown in. And Sentinels, if you don't know, are giant robots that kill mutants. And then Orchis comes in. Dr. Stasis, Omega Sentinel. All these different Orchis members. Coming onto Krakoa, MODOK. And all culminating in a standoff where they blow up the mansion that they're partying in, and everyone's falling out of the mansion. There's humans here, so that's not good. And Jean Grey just stops time. She's holding everybody in place, and her and Professor X and I think Hope Summers are all talking and trying to reason with Orchis, and then Moira McTaggart comes up behind Jean, and she stabs her with now, normally it wouldn't be a problem if you stabbed a mutant because they unlocked the power of resurrection. But this had Otherworld, I think Otherworld dust on it. And Otherworld stuff, anything from Otherworld, you can't be resurrected, or you're not resurrected as the same person when you die in Otherworld or because of Otherworld, anything like that. And basically, they threaten Charles Xavier. They're like, we're going to kill all these humans if you do not make all mutants leave Earth. Now, at this moment, Mother Righteous tampers with the portals that they're going to Mars. They were supposed to go to Mars. She tampers with them for them to go to the White Hot Room. And that's resolved in Immortal X-Men 18. Then, basically what happens, Jean goes, before she's about to die, she tells Firestar, hey, listen, you're going to be an Orchis spy. I'm going to implant fake memories, and you're going to be like a double agent, pretending to be a spy. And yeah, just every single page turn, there's just something new and exciting, and it's just a great comic overall. So, yeah. I just couldn't recommend it more in any of these comics on the list. I could not recommend more. But yeah, that's gonna do it for the 2023 second annual Comic Awards. I hope you guys had fun. Happy New Year. Put your New Year's resolutions in the comments below. One of mine is I want to get this channel to 80 subscribers because we got 40 last year. I want to double that. So yeah, thank you guys for all the support this year. It's been great, and I'll be seeing you guys next time.